Well, it's dyno day. Get to see if all my hard work has paid off. Finally get to put this all-wheel drive to the test on the dyno and fix some of the tune. The big thing that I want to clean on the tune is just the ignition timing. I fixed a big boost control issue with, I fixed that by changing how I control the boost. I explained that in a different video, but now that boost holds completely flat all the way to redline, I hopefully won't have torque drop off as hard, and hopefully I can tune ignition timing a bit more to hold it flat if it does tend to drop off just a tiny bit in the top end, but we'll see. I don't have any goals other than to just get a real good tune in it, and whatever it makes, and we have to be happy with that. Got the car behind me, it's all ready to go, loaded up, and yeah, I'm gonna be doing a DynoJet this time. Only reason I'm doing a DynoJet is because the Mustang dyno near me, the shop shut down unfortunately, and they had to sell the dyno. So that's really unfortunate, but DynoJet it is. It's gonna read a little bit higher than my old number, so I can't do a direct comparison, but at least I'll be able to compare the curve. So let's get to it. I got the car loaded up. I'll show you everything I'm bringing and we can get to the shop. And I have the plugs, got new plugs all pre-gapped. Just gonna change them when I get there because I got like a 20-minute drive there. I also want to make it clear that I do tune the car myself. I know some people ask who tunes the car. I tune it. I always have, and I always will. I've been tuning this car since I was 18 years old. I build my own motors, I tune my own car, and I race my own car, and that's how it's always gonna be. So just wanted to make that clear before we move on. Car is all nice and cleaned up. Ain't gonna catch me going to the dyno with a dirty car. I got so much loaded up in here. I got my main tool set, all my torque wrenches. I got my jump pack that I use. It's got a 400 watt inverter. I got a bunch of stuff in here. I got my tuning stuff, my camera stuff, some drinks. I got my big electronics toolbox, a fire extinguisher, of course. Over here in the trunk, we got this loaded up. Got my red toolbox, got my knock equipment, and then I got a bunch of just miscellaneous stuff. Ton of extension cords for powering all this various stuff. And then I got this all nice and ratcheted, strapped down, so it ain't going anywhere. Because I do have a little PWM fuel pump controller here that's kind of sticking up, and I don't want any of this to knock onto that and break it on the drive there. I got to clean that up at some point, but old 5-sil. It's ready to go, I think, and I'm feeling pretty good about this dyno session. I have so many street pulls on this thing, probably like close to like 70 or 80 street pulls with it, all-wheel drive now. So I gotta buy some new headlight wipers too. Don't worry, I'm putting those back on, but looking forward to the dyno session, and I think everything's gonna go hopefully fairly smoothly. So gonna get this warmed up, drive over there. It's about a 20-30 minute drive just down the turnpike, real quick and easy. And as we get there, we'll put the new plugs in, get everything unloaded, get it strapped down, and start tuning. I'm going to, the shop's a little bit different. They don't let you drive it. Well, I mean, I could drive it if I provided them with some insurance, but I'm just gonna sit in the passenger seat and tune it because just focus on the tuning, have someone else drive it. It's not a big deal. So I downloaded all the run files from the dyno computer, and I did about 13 runs, and couldn't be happier with the first run. 667 all-wheel horsepower and 498 all-wheel torque. You can see torque dropped off a little bit, but not as hard as it used to on the previous dyno sessions. It's because I fixed the boost control. This is on 22 pounds. Again, just making a ton of torque, and this is because of the high compression motor. It has 11.5 to 1 compression versus like 8.5 with the standard Weisco pistons, and it has 2.6 liters of displacement and has a ton of headwork and massive cams. It's doing pretty good. I mean, it's making 300 wheel horsepower at 5,000 RPM, and at 5200, 5500, it's making 400 wheel, and it carries it, just keeps carrying it. It's making more horsepower as it revs, so that's good. I try to make torque as flat as possible, but I guess it's just pretty natural for it to drop off a little bit in the high RPMs. I could bring it down and limit it and make it flat, but I'm pretty happy with this power curve. Carries out nicely, and the torque doesn't drop off too hard. So overall, for the first run, this is fantastic. Couldn't be more happy than that. The way I want to show these data logs is through these histograms. I think it just is a good way to show all of the data. So we're going to have RPM versus map for everything. So we can see, basically, we're looking at, I have a bunch of saved histogram views, all of these, so we'll take a look at all these. We can see boost, it's holding 22, 22.5 pounds all the way to redline. No problem there. Our AFRs, I'm not pushing the AFR too much. I'm just trying to run 11.5, to 11.8, and it's holding that perfectly. I could lean it out more to 12.0, but, it's probably not worth the 20 horsepower when I can just keep it a little bit on the rich side and turn up the boost a little bit. So leaving that pretty much alone, let's take a look at our exhaust gas temperature. You can see we're running about 1250, 1300, 1400. So this is in Fahrenheit. So this is probably like 750, 700, 750 C. You can see the exhaust gas temperatures are perfect. When the dyno operator lets off and it runs down a little bit, they're not rising too much more than the peak value here. No problems there. We can take a look at let's take a look at oil pressure. Oil pressure pretty much holding 75 pounds all the way to redline. So very healthy motor oil pressure wise. Let's take a look at fuel pressure. It's holding 61 pounds of fuel pressure all the way to redline. My base pressure is about 42 pounds. So 42 pounds plus 20 pounds of boost is right around 60. So that's perfectly in check. Let's take a look at our coolant pressure. Not much coolant pressure because I'm not running a closed system. I'm running Evans waterless, so it's not building much coolant pressure, coolant system pressure. Crankcase pressure, we're seeing about half a pound of crankcase pressure. So not a whole ton of crankcase pressure. That's well within check. Let's take a look at our exhaust back pressure. So we're seeing about 18 to 19 pounds of exhaust back pressure with 22 pounds of boost. So that's in check. We can take a look at our intercooler pressure drop. We're seeing about 1 to 1.5 pounds of intercooler pressure drop. So definitely not maxing out anything here. That looks very good. Let's take a look at our manifold temperature. So we're seeing about 112. So we're seeing about, for manifold temperature, I like to look at, it lags behind a little bit, so I like to look at the numbers down here. So max, we're seeing about 120 degrees Fahrenheit of manifold temperature. An injector duty cycle, 55%. These 2200 cc injectors, they'll make all the power in the world. So plenty of fuel. Let's see, anything else you want to look at? Not much really on this first run. I mean, everything's well within check. Everything's just lightly, briskly jogging. Nothing's being overworked at this point. So runs 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are all at 22 pounds again. I was just playing around with the ignition timing. Last time I had it in the dyno, I think I got the timing pretty darn spot on, because all of these runs I was trying to add ignition timing. So 2, 3, 4, and 5, I was trying to add ignition timing, and I really just wasn't making any more power or torque. In some cases, I was actually making less torque. So I really do think my ignition timing was already at MBT. So again, I was trying to play around with it, trying to add more timing up top to hopefully pull this torque up. But it really wasn't doing anything. So just runs playing around with ignition timing all at the same boost, and really wasn't getting anywhere because the timing was pretty much already where it needed to be. So after this, I decided to start playing around with the boost, and we will check that out in the next clips. So here we can see a comparison of run 1 and run 7. All I did was turn up the boost 2 pounds. The timing I left pretty much identical, because from my previous couple runs, I found that I was already at MBT and I didn't need to continue playing with the timing. So you can see we made about 30 horsepower more and about 30 pound-feet of torque more. You can see the slope of the torque is pretty much exactly the same. Everything just kind of moved up on the graph a little bit. So pretty cool that, 2 pounds of boost is making additional, let's say 30 wheel horsepower. So 15 to 20 wheel horsepower per pound of boost isn't half bad. Curve looks good. Let's keep upping the boost. So again, on this run, we're running about 24 pounds of boost. This is when I just started turning up the duty cycle. So this is about 30% duty cycle. So it only got me like a pound or two, not much. After 30%, the boost increases, start getting a lot more aggressive. Oil pressure looks good. Fuel pressure still looks good. You can see our fuel pressure starting to rise 1-to-1 with our boost. Exhaust gas temperatures are pretty much still around that 1450, 1470 range. Very good. AFR is still around that 11.5. Let's take a look at coolant temp. We didn't look at coolant temp's reaching about 190. This engine runs fairly cool. It has like a 160-degree thermostat, so you can see it reached around like 195 at the end of the pull from 189. So, like 5-10 degrees. Not bad. Exhaust back pressure is still staying down. We're getting close to that 1-to-1 ratio. So it's definitely moving a lot of air mass through this thing. Intercooler pressure drops still around 1 to 1.3. Not much of this stuff has changed because we only turned the boost up 2 pounds. So everything's looking good here. And start looking at the other pulls. All right, now we're looking at run 8, comparing it to run 7. We went from 24 to 28 pounds of boost, so we can see we held that 15 all-wheel horsepower per pound of boost. Went from 695 to 762. Again, the curve looks identical. Everything's just moving up, so we're not hitting any restrictions yet, really. We're making really good torque. Things are coming in pretty good. And again, just another run of turning up the boost and not really touching anything else. Pretty much from here on out, I'm done playing with the timing. I found my MBT curve, and I'm pretty much going to try and run that curve all the way to my max boost and see what it makes. So pretty happy with this run. 762 at 28 pounds of boost, 27, 28. It's pretty good. Happy with that. So this pull is when we went from 30% duty cycle to 40% duty cycle. So our boost is now running about 28 pounds. And it's holding flat. It's doing real good. This is when we start making some power. It really picks up quite a bit of power. AFR holding around 11.4, 11.5. The closed loop control mega squirt does great. Coolant temperature still around 170, 180.
doesn't jump up too much. Coolant pressure, like I said, this is just staying in check. This isn't going to change. It's not a closed system. It vents to atmosphere because it's waterless coolant. Crankcase pressure is still around 1/2 pound. That's not changing or going up too crazy. Exhaust gas temperature is still right around that 1400. A little bit less on this run actually. You can see it's around 1400, 1450. So it's really 28 pounds is really starting to get into the center of the compressor mat probably. Exhaust back pressure is around starting to creep up above that 1-to-1 ratio. Fuel pressure, of course, we're still making more fuel pressure because we're making more boost. Let's take a look. So the exhaust back pressure is starting to get up a little bit above intake back pressure. So we are starting to have a restriction on the exhaust side, whether the housing or the turbine wheel are too small for this power or the exhaust. But this is fine. You can probably go up to 1 bar higher on the exhaust back pressure versus intake back pressure before you have to really, stop turning things up. I see pressure drop still around 135, 140, 1.4 pounds. Still nothing crazy. Let's take a look at our intake air temperature. Still up around that 120, 127, 130. I mean, 120 to 130 is great for this boost level and power. And of course, oil pressure is just holding rock steady at 70 to 80 pounds. So again, another very healthy run. Nothing's out of spec. Everything's in check, and everything's kind of just, the engine's just jogging right now. Nothing's really being pushed hard. Skipping runs 9 and 11, there were some issues with the operator pushing in the clutch pedal accidentally and causing the revs just to go straight to redline. So those were pretty incomplete runs. But between run 8 and 10, nothing really changed. I tried playing with timing a little bit more in the higher boost, when the compressor is more in its sweet spot. But again, the timing is just right there. It's a longer rod motor. It's a 147 millimeter rod motor, and it's got a 93.2 millimeter stroke. So I'm just thinking maybe it just doesn't need a ton of timing, especially with the high compression, to make good torque and power. So again, nothing really changed here, and going to go to runs 12 and 13 where I really started turning up the boost. So between runs 10 and 12, I turned up the duty cycle 5%, so it made like an extra pound of boost. And you can see, again, the slope's pretty much exactly the same for both the torque and power curve. Just everything moved up a little bit, made more torque, made more power. And things are looking pretty good. I mean, the torque's holding on fairly well. 100, like a 75 pound-foot drop over 3,000 RPM. That's not too bad. It's doing pretty good. And the power just holds real nice and flat up top. So pretty large amount of power and torque here. And not much change other than just 1 more pound of boost. So run 13 was the final run. I turned up the duty cycle from 45 to 50% and made like another pound and a half. And it went from 793 to 818. And again, you can see the slope is exactly the same. Like there's still power and torque left in this turbo. I think I could probably turn it up from 30 to maybe 35 pounds. At this point, I was like, do I want to keep pushing it? Should I try and push for 850 all-wheel horsepower on my Volvo 850? And I was like, you know what? 818, 30 pounds. This is plenty. The tune's super safe. Like, this will run forever. And I decided to just leave it. Let's have some fun with the car. Let's race it. Let's get some street footage. Let's get some race footage, you know? In the fall, when it's cooler, we can turn it up. It was 95 degrees out. Like, it was insanely hot out this day. It was, that's like 35, 37 degrees Celsius. So the IATs were super hot. I bet if I were to go back on a cooler fall day, I'd probably make another 30, 40 wheel horsepower just from the change in IAT alone. Anyway, I'm happy with this. The final curve looks really good and clean. Holds torque pretty flat for like 1200 RPMs, and then it starts dropping off a little bit, but the power just carries all the way out. It's not even starting to nose over yet, so there's definitely more left in it. And compared to run 1, you can see, you know, it's making you know, torque a little bit later on the last run than the first, but it just, the slope's the same for the curves. Everything just moves up. So there's definitely more left in this. Can definitely turn it up more, maybe another 5 pounds, but no reason to keep pushing it now. Let's have some fun with it. So we're going to be taking a look at the last log for the last pull that made 818 all-wheel horsepower. I'm just going to go through all my saved histogram views. So our AFRs were holding constant at 11.4. 11.5, you can see they were a little bit lower here because it goes a little bit rich when you let off the gas at the end of the pull. Our boost held 30 pounds, 31, so 30 to 31 pounds for about 818 all-wheel horsepower. Our coolant temperature, right around that 180 to 190 Fahrenheit range, so really not putting a ton of heat into the coolant. Coolant system's doing well. Coolant pressure is still around that 5 to 6 pounds per square inch. Again, Evans waterless coolant with a hole drilled in the cap, so there's no pressure other than the pressure from the water pump. Crankcase pressure still holding that 0.3 to 0.5 pounds per square inch range. Not a ton of crankcase pressure, not going to be blowing out seals. Definitely have a great crankcase ventilation system. Exhaust gas temperature still around that 1450 range. You can see we're turning the boost up, you know, 10 pounds, and our exhaust gas temperature is really not even going up that much. You can see down towards here, maybe 1523. That's totally in spec. That's like 760 Celsius, like 800 Celsius. Like, the max you want to run is around 1000 Celsius, and we're just 200 below that. So we're not even pushing EGTs on this boost level. So there's definitely more left in it. Exhaust back pressure, 40 pounds of exhaust back pressure on only 30 pounds of boost. So I think our hot side's pretty much maxed out. I think maybe we could put a couple more pounds of boost in it, but I don't think there's a reason to raise the boost much more because our exhaust back pressure is just going to keep going up higher and higher, and this is going to cause cylinder filling issues and detonation possibility, and our EGTs might continue to rise. Pretty much maxed out there. Fuel pressure, 70 pounds. So 40 plus 30 is 70. So fuel pressure is holding up. No fuel delivery issues at all. So yeah, you can see our exhaust back pressure is 10 pounds over our intake back pressure or our boost pressure. So I think the hot side's pretty much getting close to maxed. I could push it more, but like I said, I don't think there's a reason to. This is a ton of power. IC pressure drop, still just 1 pound. 1 to 1.5 pounds. I mean, that's nothing. This DO88 intercooler is freaking insane. It is so good. It does a great job of cooling that air and keeping the pressure drop down. Injector duty cycle, we're seeing about 65 to 70%. So we still have 30% left on the injector. So we can make more power on these injectors. I say we could push another 100 all-wheel horsepower on these injectors before we get to that 85% range. So a ton of fuel left on the 2200s and on the fuel pumps. I mean, that's not even close to being a restriction. Our intake air temp, you can see our intake air temp's definitely getting up there now, 130 down to 140. It's probably nothing crazy until like on the 85. I wouldn't worry about this until 150, 160. So definitely not a restriction. I mean, this is on the dyno. There's barely any air going through this intercooler. You know, there's the fan, but it's not doing much. So this is fine. You know, at the end of Pocono runs, I've only seen 150 from, you know, a 234 at 30 pounds. So the DO88 intercooler is great. I'm not worried about it. And again, oil pressure just holding that 65, 70 to pounds all the way to redline. Definitely a very healthy motor. Everything looks great. Nothing is being pushed. Nothing is being stressed. Everything's just right in the middle of the range, which is just absolutely fantastic for this power level. I think it's very healthy right now. Everything's very safe, and I think it should live a very long time. You know, the engine, that is, very long time at this boost level and power level. Really happy with it. Really happy with just how overbuilt everything is, and you know, it can take more. We can put a way bigger turbo on this thing in the future if we want to.
Really happy with how the dyno session went. Again, you know, numbers are numbers. So I'm not going to try and get too fed up in the numbers. The real numbers that actually count are the ones at the track. But it definitely provided some really good data on what the power band and torque curve and everything looks like. I put months and months of prep into that dyno session, you know, hundreds of miles of street driving. So it's not like I'm just hopping on there doing 13 poles, making all this power. I have done so much prep on the street, so much prep behind the scenes that I just haven't fully shown. So just keep that in mind. This stuff isn't magic. You don't just hop on the dyno and make a ton of power. There's so much prep that goes into it behind the scenes that I don't always show. But really happy with how things went. The car has a great tune in it. And I know which boost level corresponds to which power now. So time to get some track testing in.